Nashville Predators aren't in the postseason this year, so the question is, just how close are they towards getting back to being a contender? We'll debate that with a look at the old Stanley Cup checklist from The Athletic and some thoughts on the NHL playoffs so far from yours truly and Ann. Coming up today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day every single day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast available to you wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. I'm Nick Morgan. I am a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at InsideThePreds.com.
Also want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Ann, Stanley Cup playoffs in full swing, and oh boy, did Twitter explode after the events of last night? And I can be talking about any one of a number of things, I think, when I say
true.
that sentence, too.
Yeah, last night was an insane night. I will say this. I think this first round has been so incredibly exciting, engaging, interesting, so many storylines in so many of the different games. But last night was hockey on steroids. I mean, so many twists and turns. You had the Tampa Bay Toronto game. Of course, you have the Seattle, Colorado kerfuffle and, overtime game, the Devils tying it up. Like, so much is going on in these playoffs. It is so exciting. It almost, but so not quite, makes up for the fact that we aren't watching the Predators.
I was just about to say, doesn't it seem like we're able to kind of sit back and enjoy it more now that we're not worried about getting swept or doing something absolutely stupid in round one? Feels like we actually sit back and be like, oh, you know what? Watching hockey is actually kind of fun.
I know. It's like, this is your hockey angst. It's not my hockey angst.
Yeah.
So, it is a little bit more fun to say, my investment is, I hope that my bracket turns out all right. Not, how terrible is this team that we cover going to perform?
Yeah. Less discourse from our end. That's for sure. So, we've talked about the playoffs and our cold open a little bit, but let's actually dive in to some of these series because it's really fun. Tampa Bay and Toronto. There's some symbolism going on here, and a lot of people are pointing out. Of course, Toronto overcomes a 4-1 deficit to win in overtime. That's significant because there is another significant 4-1 blown lead in Toronto's playoff canon, ironically 10 years ago this year. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's the symbolism. Like, that's it right there. That's, Toronto exercising all of their playoff demons. Yeah. They haven't won the series yet. And it's a funny thing. If you go to Down Goes Brown's article on last night's game, it was like Q&A, and it's like, well, yeah, but it's going to be hard to blow a 3-1 lead, right? And his response is, absolutely, please shut up. Please stop
That's
talking.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And so I think there's like cautious optimism, but at the same time, I think Maple Leafs fans are like, okay, what excitingly fun way are we going to absolutely crap the bed this time?
I don't know. I will say this. I watched that game and I was really surprised, first of all, how quickly and how calmly Toronto got back in that game within like a 7-minute span. They're like, and we're going to even this game up. Way to go, Austin Matthews, who we may talk about later in the show. I don't know. Yeah. But I really think and I don't want to speak anything over it because hockey is just some sort of weird sports voodoo. But I really wonder if that game is going to be a huge turning point for Toronto, because that was the ultimate dig deep, don't get in your head, just do what you need to do. And I think Tampa Bay left the ice absolutely flummoxed. They showed the crowd, the Tampa Bay crowd, and they looked like just stunned at what had happened. So I'm very excited to see both teams' responses when they take the ice against each other again, because what a game. What a game.
Yeah. You know, it's funny when I watched Tampa Bay, they kind of had the look they had in Colorado last year, where they got to like game 4 or game 5, and you could just tell like they were out of gas.
Yeah.
Like they were just getting beat to every puck. A lot of like the speedy players just weren't there. Looked like they were a step behind. And you gotta wonder, as long as that team's been around as much playoff hockey as they've played, over the last 3-4 years or so, like have we reached kind of the expiration point? But at the other point, this is the Tampa Bay Lightning we're talking about. So
Very true.
if there is ever a team to climb out of a 3-1 hole, it would be Tampa.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how Vasilevsky does too, because I'm like you, I'm like, are we kind of seeing fatigue in net? I don't know. Let's see what happens in this next game. I'm very interested to see how each team responds.
Yeah, and Andrei Vasilevsky himself has not had a great series.
Yeah,
I think that's worth pointing out too. Let's go to Seattle and Colorado because, oh boy, are we now – we're back in it. Seattle won last night, so it's 2-2 going back to Colorado. But let's talk about that Cale Makar hit, shall we? Because you just felt the entire temperature of the series flip on a dime right there. First off, Anne, suspension worthy, not suspension worthy. What are your thoughts on that Cale Makar hit itself?
Let me be clear. I don't think in any way, shape, or form that Cale Makar is a dirty player. Or anything like that. I do think this hit is suspension worthy, and he is having a meeting with player safety. That puck was not even in the same time zone. And even if it were, if you watch that play, Cale Makar is not looking for the puck. He's going straight for the hit on McCann. And, I would be very surprised if there wasn't a suspension. And I think if there is a suspension, it's going to have a huge impact on this series. So this decision is a big decision for player safety.
My thing is, okay, so I heard Cale Makar's explanation, and, a couple of Avalanche writers tweeted the same thing. It's like, well, he didn't know where the puck was, and, the whistle didn't come till after the play was over, and that's the right call to knock it down to just a minor. If that's let's put it in perspective. If that's, let's say, Matt Dumba or Tom Wilson or Nazem Kadri, if that's one of those players who just absolutely takes a run at the other team's best player well after the puck was gone, while the player was like not even, looking for the puck or had his head the other way. If another player like that does that, are we talking about this in the same vein as if it was somebody other than Cale Makar? Because Cale Makar, we hear this and it's like, oh, he plays to the whistle, he's tough. He was just, that. Why would we give him the benefit of the doubt that we wouldn't give, a dirty player?
Right.
If Tom Wilson makes that hit on somebody, we are, taking our poster boards and, giant cardboard signs outside player safety office ready to kick this guy out of the league.
100%.
And I agree. Cale Makar, not a dirty player. You don't see him make a lot of dirty plays, but this was a dirty play. Yeah. And you got to send a message. I think to me, it's going to be one game.
Yeah. I
Maybe
don't think
one game. They're not going to do the Michael Bunting thing and kick Cale Makar out for 3 games. But I do think they send a message because that was out. And, if McCann is hurt, that's a theory shifter right there.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because if the roles were reversed and this was Mikko Rantanen or Nathan McKinnon taking a hit like this. I wonder if the temperature among Colorado fans would be a little bit different with the exact same hit, the exact same timing, the exact same situation. And again, don't think Cale Makar's a dirty player at all. But that hit is an illegal hit regardless of who does it.
Yeah, dick move. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the way you sum it up is dick move.
I mean, there it is.
Yeah.
But how about Seattle coming out, and the environment in that arena was amazing, but Seattle came out, and Seattle is playing with such sauciness and physicality and speed. This has been a surprisingly fascinating series for me. Seattle has really knocked my socks off with just the tenacity and the physicality and the speed. Like, they don't seem like anybody has told them, hey, you're playing one of the teams that is a Western Conference favorite. I don't think Seattle knows that, nor do they care.
Well, they're also probably better equipped to handle the Colorado Avalanche than the Nashville Predators were last year.
Well, there's that.
It's you're seeing, I think, and I think I went back in Seattle beat Colorado 2 of the 3 times they played this year, and they kind of have that sort of edge what Colorado did to teams last year. They just have a lot of depth. Yeah. And, they have guys, on their 3rd or 4th line that play just as tenacious and are just as dangerous as those big guns. So that was kind of the kryptonite of a lot of teams that played Colorado last year. And this year, Seattle is kind of keeping it close in the same way. I still think Colorado wins the series, but this is, a good indication of just how good Seattle is now. Quick look at a couple other series. Vegas up 3-1 now after a win over the Jets last night. Seems like Vegas has this, Ann.
I'm so surprised because I really felt like Winnipeg went into the playoffs where they needed to be. And they're going to have to do something. They just can't seem to get it going against Vegas. And I don't know that I necessarily think Vegas has looked outrageously good. I just think Winnipeg has not brought the game that they can play. So they're going to have to get it together. Otherwise, the Jets were one of my upset picks, and they are letting me down. Come on, Nino.
Both of us had the Jets winning round 1, and they went out that first game and we're like, absolutely killing it. We're like, all right, Winnipeg kind of showing what they're made of. Just kind of not look as sharp the last few games. And then Devils tying up the Rangers, Ann.
I love it.
Surprised at that. Two back-to-back wins on the road at Madison Square Garden for New Jersey.
That's the thing I think that shocks me the most is not necessarily that the series is tied. It's that the Devils came in under pressure and won 2 games at Madison Square Garden. Yeah. That series is going to be a little more interesting than I thought. I still think the Rangers are going to win it, but
Jack Hughes has entered the chat.
Oh my goodness.
That's the biggest difference maker. And Akira Schmidt in goal, but Jack Hughes has woken up. Being like, okay, you want playoff Jack Hughes? You're going to get playoff Jack Hughes.
Here I am.
You know what we didn't get this year, Ann? We didn't get playoff Nashville Predators. As we mentioned, the Preds not in the playoffs. David Boyle had some comments about some of the positives he sees in this team, and that got us I guess just us. That got us thinking, how close are the Predators towards making another run back towards being contender? How close are they? We're going to break out the Athletic Stanley Cup checklist and see just what some of the biggest holes the Preds need to fill, whether that's free agent, development, whatever. We're going to do that today on the Locked On Predators podcast. First, though, want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, you guys always wish you could just handpick the best stars for your team. Yeah, handpick Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and call it a day. That would be a pretty good roster, right? Don't you wish you could do the same thing when you are building your business team? Well, if you're hiring your talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is a hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. That way, you don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills. You can do it all with Indeed. You can find top talent with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. And if you hate waiting, Indeed's US data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Indeed knows that when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. So visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Again, Indeed.com/lockedon. One more time, Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everybody. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. And we are talking about the Nashville Predators in vein of the Nashville Predators missing the Stanley Cup playoffs for the first time since 2014. Although, let's be honest, they weren't exactly contenders. The last couple of years, they made it into the postseason. So that kind of got us thinking, just how close are the Predators towards being back in that conversation? We know they have some stars. We know they have Juuso Parssinen, one of the best goalies in the NHL to build around. We know Roman Josi, although defensively this year wasn't great. Roman Josi continually in the conversation for one of the best defensemen in the NHL, top 5 easily. But what else do they have? What do they need? And so we decided to break out the Athletics Stanley Cup contender checklist. If you haven't seen it, this is something that Dom Luszczyszyn and Shayna Goldman put out every year, basically kind of measuring, okay, there's certain things that every Stanley Cup contender seems to always have. Does this team kind of meet the requirement? And quick answer is looking at the Nashville Predators. That answer is no.
No.
They do not have a lot of things on the checklist.
No. But what is interesting is until you sit down and break down the checklist, I think just strict vibes only, just doing a vibe check.
Yeah.
Everybody feels really positive, I think, at the end of the season because of what we saw, especially from these younger players that were called up. So, going into this, I'm like, hey, let's see. Just based on vibes alone, everybody's pretty optimistic. But when you break down the X's and O's of this, there are some holes that the Nashville Predators have to fill. And can some of these young players that we got glimpses of step into some of these roles? I don't know. I don't know, Nick.
The X's and O's quickly become X's and O craps.
O's.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. So this is, according to Athletic, these are the 12 things that every Stanley Cup team has: an elite center, an elite winger, an elite defenseman, and an elite goalie. So there's top 4 players right there. And then they have top line center, 2 top line wingers, and a number 1 defenseman. So these are like guys that, based on your top half, these are guys that are maybe playing on your, second line or third line, but they're good enough to be number 1s on any other NHL team. And then you have a top 6 forward, and then a top pair defenseman and a top pair defenseman. Again, guys that maybe either on your second or third line that are good enough to be either on your top pair defensively or in the top 6. There's 2 things that I think you can absolutely, no question about, say the Nashville Predators have. Mm-hmm. And that's elite defenseman and elite goalie.
Agreed.
Everything else, that's where I think some of the debate comes in.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like square peg round hole. Can you make this person that we see really into that elite center? And I agree with you. I think when it comes to elite defensemen and elite goaltending, there's no question that the Predators have that. And as much as everybody kind of whispered about trading Juuso Parssinen, that is such a key component to this, that if you're really looking to get back in the playoffs, if the Nashville Predators are looking at a reset and not a long-term rebuild, you've got to keep that elite goaltending.
I think the debate is, okay, well, if you're not going to win right now, then trade UC Saros and find somebody that you can develop into, 2 spots instead of just one. But
Mhm.
that's, wishful thinking
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, because we often don't see that completely happen. To me, and the biggest thing for this Nashville Predators team, and maybe the biggest reason for their, quote unquote midness
Mhm.
over some of their history, is where is that elite center?
Let's go.
And
Yeah.
where is that elite winger?
Yeah.
And that's the biggest hole. And that's something, every Stanley Cup team that has won in, over the past decade, you look at somebody that's like, that's a center that right now, maybe not, long term, but right now, this season, at this very moment, this is a guy who's, easily top 6 or 7 center in the entire NHL.
Right.
Every team has had that.
Yeah.
And the Nashville Predators, for whatever reason, they tried by trading for Ryan Johansson. They tried developing some guys, drafting, the Colin Wilsons of the world. They tried bringing in Matt Duchene. And it just, I don't know why. And Barry Trotz kind of talked about it a little bit in his introductory press conference. For whatever reason, that has been the one position that has eluded the Nashville Predators in their entire history. Maybe with the one exception of when Jason Arnott was here.
Mm, yeah. And here's one of the things as you look at that elite center that you have to have. You're talking your Connor McDavids, your Austin Matthews, your Leon Draisaitl, your Jack Eichel. You really come about that in one of 2 ways. You either draft that or you buy that.
Yeah.
I think that it's very difficult to develop that. I think it's one of those things, if you're talking about one of the very best players in the world, you look at Connor McDavid. You and I were chatting about Connor McDavid before we started recording. Connor McDavid came in at like 13 years old in the league and was a 30 goal scorer.
Yeah.
You have Austin Matthews was a 40 goal scorer at the age of 19. Steven Stamkos, 28 goal scorer in his first season. And you think you either draft that, Connor Bedard, perhaps, or you sell your soul and you go out and buy it. But this is one of those positions where I'm like, can you really develop that?
Yeah, I mean, but you can. Like, that's the
You
thing.
think?
When it comes to elite players, like, you can. I mean, the Red Wings have Dylan Larkin, who statistically has always been kind of in the top 10 in terms of like goals above replacement, wins above replacement. And, he was 15th, 16th overall pick in his draft pick. So in the Red Wings kind of built him up. And, you kind of see that, even a guy like, in New York, somebody like, Brock Nelson, who you look at him and it's like, okay, it's Brock Nelson. But then you look at his stats and it's like, oh, this is a guy who's like always towards the top in goal scoring, who's always towards the top in goals above replacements. So yeah, like you may not necessarily have a Sidney Crosby or a Connor McDavid in terms of this guy is scoring 150 points a season and winning the MVP, and he's like the most marketable star. Austin Matthews, somebody else in that category. But you can easily go out and find somebody that's like, okay, you don't think of him as a quote unquote, top of class in the league.
Yes.
But he's somebody that is always very, very consistently good towards the top and, a lot of key stats. And, maybe the gold child, maybe the poster child for somebody like that, Patrice Bergeron in Boston. Just find a Patrice Bergeron.
Yeah, but then you've got to be able to afford it. And what's interesting is I feel like the Predators did this. If you look at Matt Duchene, Matt Duchene came into the league in his first full season. He was a 24 goal scorer, but it's not translating. It's not translating. And the other thing is, I think when you're talking about this position, part of what makes them elite is consistency. Connor McDavid is consistently good. Austin Matthews, consistently good. Steven Stamkos, consistently good. And I don't know that the Predators, like statistically, you could say Matt Duchene is maybe this because he has had some seasons like that. But he's also had seasons where he's not that. And so I'm like,
yes,
how much?
Remember the 13-point season.
I mean, I don't want to stir that pot, but let's talk about what's real. Consistency is part of what you need from an elite top line center, or you've got to catch lightning in a bottle and you've got to get that center having his best season while you still have these other components at the same time. So I think it's a real challenge. And I'm not sure, like I look at Ryan Johansson. Would you say Ryan Johansson has the potential to be that elite center?
Not now.
Yeah.
I mean, they did when they brought him over. I mean, that was kind of the key, but
yeah,
then the game sort of shifted, and yeah, I mean, it's wild, and like I have never, I can't think of a team that has been this devoid of just a top end offensive talent, for this entire history. I mean, even the Columbus Blue Jackets had Rick Nash, who is one of the best players in the NHL. The Thrashers had Ilya Kovalchuk and Danny Heatley. And for a while, Marian Hossa, after some of those trades went down. And it's just, I can't think of any team that has been immune to the point where the Preds are trying. Like, give them credit for going out and trying. Like, they went out, spent $8 million a year on Matt Duchene, invested in Ryan Johansson, traded away Seth Jones, one of their favorite prospects, to try to, get actually that long elusive number one center. And for some reason they come to Nashville and it's just, it doesn't work out. And I don't know why. And there are going to be a lot of theories about that. Maybe there's something wrong with this kind of, maybe the locker room culture, something like that, where for some reason, players get here and all of a sudden just fall way below their expectations. Some are going to blame, coaching, development. Some are just going to blame, maybe the front office misjudged them. I don't know. There's a lot of theories out there. I don't know if we're ever going to get a definitive answer, but it's frustrating and it's noticeable.
It is. It is. And you know what? This isn't the only hole that the Nashville Predators need to address. There's a couple of other offensive holes that, like, do the Predators have somebody that can jump in now? And then we still got to talk about defense. There's some defense that we need to talk about. Got Yossi. What else do we got?
Yeah.
So we're going to dive into that here in just a minute. But first, want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. Look, if you are buying tickets to your favorite events and it is stressful trying to get what you want when you want it, you need to look into our friends at Game Time. Whether you're looking to take in a sporting event, some music, a comedy show, or perhaps just throwing it out there, a little musical theater near you, you can get killer last-minute deals with Game Time, and you can stop stressing over tickets. Start getting hyped for your event. Game Time makes it so easy to find flash and last-minute tickets for every kind of event with their easy-to-use app. You can forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. And the Game Time guarantee means you always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. You can get images of your seats and buy tickets just in a matter of seconds. 2 taps, your tickets are sent right to your phone and you are ready to go. So go and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
All right, Ann, we're talking about the Predators and some of the holes they need to fill in terms of being back towards a contender. There's a lot. Number one center, I feel like, is the biggest one.
Yeah.
That I think has eluded the Nashville Predators for a long time. Then you go into some of these other ones, and it's, a top line center beyond, the elite center. And, that's one of those things where I think if you get an elite center, then maybe somebody like Ryan Johansson or Matt Duchene kind of fill in as like a depth guy.
Right.
Kind of like, you look at Taylor Hall in Boston and, playing some of his best hockey, on the second and third line in Boston. Number one defenseman beyond Roman Yossi. Like, who's the other guy that you can kind of build around? Who are your other top pair defensemen?
Yeah.
And then who's, forwards, kind of on your, second and third lines that could easily be a first round forward on another team. That's, here's my question. Do you think the Predators have enough that if they can kind of address the top of their lineup, maybe some of these people fill in the gaps later on? Maybe they fall into a position they're better suited for.
I do. I think that is the biggest thing that they need, is that elite top line guy. Yeah. And, you've got Philip Forsberg, you've got Matt Duchene. We've seen some really great things. If you're looking at like middle six, we've seen some great things from, Juuso Parssinen. We've seen some great things from Tommy Novak and Luke Evangelista. Will that continue? Are they going to be able to continue elevating their game? We're going to have to wait and see. They are going to have some really big off-season improvements and impressive training camps. Yeah. But I think you have enough pieces, maybe not for right now, but for almost, if you can get that top line guy. Forsberg is not nothing. Philip Forsberg is not nothing, friends. And, you look, could Luke Evangelista be something? I like what we've seen from Cody Glass. Obviously, we like what we've seen from Tommy Novak. But again, it's really hard to bank on those guys that showed so much down the end of the stretch, because that was a 20-game stretch. You're looking at an 82-game season. You're looking at, can you duplicate and replicate that? And I think every Nashville Predators fan has that, dear heavens, we can't always duplicate or replicate, can we? Yeah. So I think there are pieces to draw from. I don't know that the Predators have the pieces that would be ready right now, even if you added that elite top line center. But they've got some potential. Joachim Kimmel. Let's see what happens with that fella.
Yeah. I think that's the best way to sum her up. I think the Nashville Predators, when you look at their pipeline and some of the players that have played this year, a lot of players that are just really good hockey players that can develop into really good hockey players. Are there any of them that are going to be among the best players in the NHL? Mm-hmm. That's the question. And you know what? To be clear, you don't necessarily have to win with players that are quote unquote elite. I mean, it certainly helps. Mm-hmm. You just need a bunch of really good hockey players. I mean, look at the Seattle Kraken this year and look what they're doing. And, there's just 4 lines and 3 defensive pairs of just really solid hockey players. That to me is where the Nashville Predators, I think that's the first step. Like, that to me is the first step in getting back towards contenders. Just pack your roster with really, really good hockey players. Like, make sure you can roll 4 lines deep, kind of like the old Barry Trotz teams, where you can just roll out any of the lines and, they were going to compete. They were going to really give their opponents problems when they're on the ice. That to me is the first step. And if the Nashville Predators can get there, then I feel like you can take a step back and be like, okay, who's like that one missing piece? Or, let's look at the top of the lineup. Do we have somebody that is quote unquote elite, or somebody that is at least trending in that way? And, maybe at that point, that's when you start, being a buyer in some of these NHL markets. Maybe you can, do like what the Florida Panthers did for Matthew Tkachuk. Be like, okay, we got a pretty good team. We got a pretty deep team. Now let's go out and get that one elite player to kind of build around. That's, I feel like, if the Nashville Predators, you keep developing Luke Evangelista, you keep developing Cody Glass, Tommy Novak, Joachim Kimmel comes up, all these players, if you can develop them and just, get them to a point where it's like, okay, we have a bunch of really good players on this team, then you can, I think, maybe take a step back and look at it. Okay, what's the next step for this player? Can we get him to maybe being that 100-point guy every year? Or have a lot of these people kind of reached where we think they're going to be? And if so, now what do we do?
And I think so much is a timing question. I think you really hit one of the big things that Barry Trotz is going to have to wrestle with this offseason. You know, he was very clear in the postseason press conference. Look, we've got draft capital, we've got cap space. If there's a big fish out there, it doesn't mean we're going to go after him because we can, because you only need the right guy. And I wonder if this isn't the time to go out and try to get the big fish. Maybe, like you say, you need to give this a season or two to see what are we going to surround a quote unquote elite top line guy with, and then go get him. This may not be the off season to do it, which is a little bit disappointing because, again, you've got draft capital and you've got cap space, you know? So it's like so much of how this is going to unfold has to do also with timing.
Yeah. I mean, let's say this. You mentioned the draft capital. You mentioned, the Preds over the next 3 years really have a lot of extra picks to play with.
Mm-hmm.
Even though maybe next year's not the year you look at competing, if you're Barry Trotz, if the opportunity arises, do you take a swing this year? Maybe like not unlike what the Devils did when they signed Dougie Hamilton last year. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
They signed him last year. The Devils were one of the worst teams in the NHL. And,
Yeah.
you kind of heard people say later, it's like, look, we're not going to be great this year, but 2 years from now, that's when we're kind of getting you for.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the Predators have a good enough idea of what they're going to have 2 seasons from now to do that investment now?
No, but if you do that now, then don't you at least have one person to build around?
Yeah. It's very much like which is the cart that's put before the horse? Do you go out and get this elite person when you've got the capital and the cap space and go that route? Or do you need to sit back and see what you have and then go fill that elite hole? I think it's going to be a lot for Barry Trotz to decide.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying go and start trading prospects to get in like a 27-year-old guy, but like let's say there's teams in cap hell. You have somebody like Alex DeBrincat who sounds like he may not re-sign in Ottawa.
Yep.
If the opportunity arises, do you go out and try to get somebody like that? And that way, maybe you're a step ahead, or do you just stockpile those draft picks and go, you know what? We're not feeling too great about this, or we think we have more holes than, we probably should. Let's just stockpile these draft picks, draft a bunch of players, and hope some of them can develop into high-end talent.
Yeah. And I think it would help if the Predators had a better idea of how long-term some of these promising young men are that we saw at the end of the season are going to pan out.
Yeah.
It would be so much. Crystal ball, anyone? Does anybody have a crystal ball? Because this would make this whole gig so much easier.
This would make our jobs a lot easier.
Oh my gosh, we'd be killing it.
We would be killing it. More Predators talk to get to later this week. At the end of the week, we're going to be doing takes from a hat with a number of different topics. One of which I think we've talked a little bit about already, but I'm excited to throw it into the universe. And then we are going to be starting player reviews soon too. We're going to look back at some of the highs and lows of a couple of Predators players on the roster, maybe give them some grades and one word to describe their season. That's coming up as well on the Locked On Predators podcast. And where can people find your work?
You can find my work online at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on Twitter at ANK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me at penaltyboxradio.com. Follow me on Twitter at _NSMorgan. Follow the show also, LO_Predators. And wherever you're listening, subscribe, my friends. That'll do it for today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Back tomorrow with an all-new episode. We'll see you then.